Today I'm in conversation with Dr. Itai Matumbike, the Medical Director of Northamptonshire NHS. I go beyond the headlines and beyond the sensational. If you enjoy this UK series brought to you by the Nyaradzo Group, remember to subscribe, to like, and to share. Let's get down to some work. Greetings. Welcome to In Conversation with Trevor UK series brought to you by the Nyaradzo Group. I go beyond the headlines and beyond the sensational. If you enjoy this series, remember to subscribe, to like, and to share. Let's get down to some work. Dr. Itai Matumbike, welcome to In Conversation with Trevor.
Thank you very much for having me.
We're delighted to have you here. We've been watching a number of you guys, Zimbabweans, who are in the NHS. It's quite a big chunk of you, eh?
Oh, yes. I think one of the biggest waves of Zimbabweans coming to the UK was in the 90s. And a lot of Zimbabweans did nursing. A lot of them went into the health profession, obviously, like myself. And what we found was that they got established. They quickly acclimatized to life in the United Kingdom, and some of them didn't really want to sort of settle within the NHS. Some of them just wanted to use it as a stepping stone. Those who remained, really excelled, and quite a lot of people are in very high office now, and it's just a testament to the kind of level of education that we have in Zimbabwe. And I think some of the difficulties and challenges that we've had in the country have led us to be people who can adapt very easily to kind of challenging situations and and excel.
How did you arrive at this point to decide to leave Zim and to come to the UK? What's your story like? What's your journey? What was the journey like?
Okay. So I was born and grew up in Zimbabwe. I lived initially in Gweru up until I was in grade 7, and then our family moved to Harare. Where I attended one of the high schools there, Prince Edward, and during high school, I think I was around Form 4. I had a conversation with my dad about career choices. I think I'd always wanted to be something exotic, like a diplomat, something like that, and I hadn't really thought of medicine. And we started talking about options. When you're young, you don't really sort of think about, what are the job opportunities? Where's my career going to take me? And that was the first sort of serious conversation I had with my old man, and we spoke about medicine. And
was he in medicine himself?
No. Interesting. He is a social scientist.
Okay.
Worked in local government, and his kind of relationship with health goes into sort of what he did for water and sanitation.
Okay.
So I often think that what he did as a civil servant, in terms of bringing clean water to people in the villages, was more impactful from a health point of view.
Sure.
Certainly, than what I've done in my medical career. But I think his interest in public health kind of led to that sort of conversation. And obviously, as a father, what he wanted was, for me to be in a career that would be sustainable.
So he pointed you towards medicine?
Yeah. Luckily we kind of had a meeting of the mind. I'd always been, quite gifted in the sciences. That was an easy choice for me.
So you're going to be a diplomat who was gifted in sciences?
Oh, yeah. I like to talk. But I think it was, I think a lot of it was kind of the exposure that we had in high school. We had a lot of kids who were children of, diplomats. So we got exposed to that. And I studied 4 languages.
Which languages were these?
So I did Shona, English, Latin, and French.
Is this at Prince Edward?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I quite like French.
Yeah.
So that's
you like
where,
French?
yeah,
Okay.
Oh yeah. So that's where the whole I fancy being a diplomat thing.
So from Prince Edward, you then went to the University of Zimbabwe. Okay. And you did work at the Ministry of Health. At some point as a junior house officer. Talk to me about that choice.
We were deployed straight after med school. So it was, I think that was one of the benefits of studying medicine, is that you always had a guaranteed job at the end of it. A pretty decent salary as well.
During those days?
During those days, yes. Oh, we did go on strike. I'll tell you a little bit about that.
I'm looking forward to that, yeah.
But what happened was our med school was affiliated to Pararinyatwa and Harare hospitals. So from 3rd year, we would go there for, ward rounds and, our clinical attachments and things like that. So we sort of got to kind of grow within those hospitals, and it was a very easy transition. So you were either deployed to Harare Central Hospitals or to Bulawayo Central Hospitals. So it was a bit of a luck of the draw where you went. So I stayed in Harare, which was quite, handy for me. Because
how long were you with the Minister of Health and Child Welfare?
For about 18 months.
18 months.
I think 2000 is when I graduated.
Yeah.
You'll probably remember that this was around about the time of, one of the most kind of earth-shattering general elections, when it was called the MDC at the time, really kind of challenged the established political party at the time. And a lot of things were changing. So one of the, things I use as a kind of barometer for how, life or the economy was on decline was, when we were in 3rd year, if you were assisting in surgery, we used to use what was called betadine scrub. So it was quite, it was betadine with, with detergent, and it was quite expensive. And we used to use double gloves, and, everything was just, the supplies were, in abundance.
Available.
By the time we, got to 5th year, the betadine scrub was diluted. So it wasn't the thick brown
An
stuff
indicator of the conditions outside.
So things were starting to get a bit scanty. And believe it or not, by the time I was a junior doctor, scrubbing for surgery, we were using Lifebuoy soap. So things were getting really, really tricky. And it was also at the height of, the AIDS pandemic. And, Zimbabwe had, probably one of the highest infection rates at the time. So you sort of have that compounding, so the economic decline, compounding a pandemic, which, ARVs at the time were not widely available. So it was quite a sorry state, within the hospitals. And, you sort of felt a little bit powerless. You wanted to make a difference. You were, trained to be able to make a difference. You knew what drugs needed prescribing, but often you watched your patients, meet their death. It was quite, sad. And I think For me, having sort of, been a little bit of a kind of reluctant medic at the beginning, by the time I'd finished med school, I was really into it. I was really into the kind of the sort of noble profession, aspect of
so
it.
that then these conditions militate against that love. What then happens?
Well, I did what most people who were, in my sort of cohort did.
What was that?
Which was to leave for the diaspora. So we went all over.
So you were pushed out by the circumstances.
Yeah, the circumstances. You know. I mean, I remember, there was a time. I think, one of the biggest kind of concerns I had was that it was becoming difficult to practice medicine the normal way. And it was only those who had means who had access to healthcare. So what would happen is that, we would, as junior doctors, do the HIV tests. And if someone had, meningitis, which was quite common at that time, and you found out that, they were HIV positive, you would then sort of ask them, do you have family in the diaspora? Because if you do, we know people who can sell you, the ARVs and, the antifungals that you need, which, are not available in the public hospitals. So, if the answer was no, you had that, challenge of informing the relatives that they were, their loved one was dying of a preventable illness, which, you couldn't do anything about.
Are you part of the cohort then, like you indicated, that went on strike to demand change in your conditions?
Yeah.
When was this?
So this was 2001. It was quite a long strike. I think it was both about the working conditions, but it was also about the pay. And that dream that my dad had sold me about, you're guaranteed employment, you'll have a decent wage.
You'll be able to buy a car, buy a house. That did not materialize.
No, all that was eroded very quickly. So what would happen was, we would, make the really hard choice to sort of, down our tools and see if the government responded.
But the government did not respond, did they?
They were sluggish in their response. To be honest with you, I think, part of me feels guilty about the impact of that, because often when you, deny treatment to people, some people, I'm already worried about people dying of preventable illnesses. Then you
withhold your labor.
Yeah, you compound that. Yes, it's for the greater good, but for the patient in front of you, it's not the best. So the response was there, but it was sluggish. Better pay, but I think the problems they ran deeper,
which then made you decide enough of this.
Yeah.
When you look at that now, you left home slightly bitter. Am I right?
A little bit disappointed. I mean, I love my country. I go there as often as I can. I think for me, the way I left and some of the exposure that I've had, some of the experience that I've had, being able to run healthcare in a much more professional way, those are all, skills that I would like to take home. But yeah, I try to do.
So home is still a possibility to go back to. That's what I'm hearing.
It is a possibility.
Yeah.
A very remote possibility.
Well, you mentioned it first, so I thought maybe let's deal with that.
I think in my working life, I think I'm used to fairness, to professionalism, to being able to. Yes, we still have to make a little go a long way in the NHS, but free healthcare is free healthcare. At the point of access. So there is a proper social security, provision of healthcare in this country, which was the dream in Zimbabwe. In the 1980s, that's what it was. It was a social security health system. But because the economy was in decline, and I'm not going to go political there, it was mismanaged. What resulted was, those hospitals being very under-resourced, and leading to that whole.
So you come into the UK. What's your entry point? What's the first thing that you do?
Yeah, I did struggle a bit.
Talk to me about that.
So
or rather, let's take a break here. This is the right time to take a break. We're going to take a break. Our viewers at home, don't go away. When we come back, we're going to go to those struggles of coming into the diaspora and adjusting. See you on the other side.
You've got a very well-paid job, high office back home. You've got to be prepared to eat humble pie when you get here.
Welcome back to our conversation with Dr. Itai Matumbike, the Medical Director for the Northamptonshire NHS. So when we took the break, you were telling us that it was a struggle coming in. What was the entry point? Break down that struggle to us, that pain, so that those at home thinking of coming into the diaspora come in understanding the challenges that do exist.
Yeah. I think the first thing I would say to anyone who's thinking about, coming to the diaspora, if you've got a very well-paid job, high office back home, you've got to be prepared to eat humble pie when you get here, because you have to start
from the bottom.
And sometimes not even in your own profession. So when I came here, I remember I had enough just to kind of, survive for, a couple of months. But it was easy to come in back then. So you could get, a visa on entry. So you get a visitor's visa for about, 6 months. So, thought that was, life was going to be pretty straightforward. So I came in, I did my first exams. They're called PLAB exams. So even though you're kind of registered medical practitioner in Zimbabwe, to gain registration here, you have to write exams. There's PLAB 1 and PLAB 2. One of them is theory. One of them is a practical clinical exam. And you have to pass PLAB 1 in order to get to PLAB 2. So getting PLAB 1 was...
What does PLAB mean? It's just PLAB?
Professional Linguistic and Assessment Board.
Right. So you did that in 2002 and 2003, hey?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So it was in 2002, pretty much. So did that. And meanwhile...
Are you keeping a job down in a part-time? What exactly are you doing to pay your way through?
You have to eat. So that's when I started working in the care industry. So I remember I was a driver for carers, domiciliary care, for about 18 months.
Yeah.
And I
for 18 months.
Yeah.
This is a guy who's just graduated, got a degree from Zim, worked with the ministry as a junior doctor. You're now driving home care patients.
Yeah.
Very humbling.
Very humbling. And I think for me, it was, I think, made a couple of, wrong turns in terms of, after finishing my PLAB, what I ought to have done was to kind of sacrifice being in a paid job and do a clinical attachment. And, a clinical attachment is that you work in a hospital, you're not paid, but then you get, a UK reference.
Right.
So, the professors that I had back home...
This is with the benefit of insight.
Yeah, this is all with the benefit of hindsight. So the professors that I had at home who were very esteemed, who were very knowledgeable in what they did, they did not, amuse any of the employers here. So what you would need in order to get a job as a junior doctor is experience, UK experience.
Yeah.
And how do you get that?
Yeah.
Without being in a paid job? So you have to do a clinical attachment. So eventually I did that.
Was that with Red Spot Home Care?
No. Red Spot Home Care was
the driving.
Was the driving.
So what did you do after driving?
I rose through the ranks within Red Spot, and for me, I think that kind of stimulated my leadership journey. So I wound up being the general manager at Red Spot. And that was because the owner of the company cordoned onto the fact that I was a doctor, and he wanted to get a Macmillan tender. So he wanted someone to help him, write tender document. So I looked at it, and it was, pretty basic, and helped him write this tender. Got a job as a kind of training manager, and because I excelled at that, he said, well, you're going to be the general manager of, this establishment. I was seduced by that for a bit. At the time, Red Spot was doing very well for itself. They had an executive box that it was White Hart Lane.
Wow.
I'm an Arsenal fan, by the way.
Wow, that's well done. Well done, smart guy.
So it was always very funny going to that executive box as an Arsenal fan, watching Tottenham.
So this seduced you for how long?
About 6 months.
Wow, okay.
Then I realized, I was pretty young then. I realized that I wanted to get back into medicine. And so I left that, to do a clinical attachment.
You did that clinical attachment with who?
In Nottingham.
Okay.
So Nottingham is where I've done all of my postgrad training.
Were there moments where you're driving this truck around where you thought, oh gosh, I better go back home?
Yeah.
There were moments like that.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
I think the work was long hours, extremely long hours for very low pay, and once you've paid for all your bills and your amenities, you've got very little to spend on yourself, and you
have no time for yourself.
You've got no time for yourself. So you start reflecting, I was a junior doctor in Zimbabwe, and, I had a car, I had a flat, I could go on holiday, and you think, wow, I want to go back to that life. The weather is a lot better.
But what stopped you from going back?
Just conversations with family, conversations with, other colleagues that had stayed behind. I remember going back once and someone saying to me, oh, do you know what? I would much rather be doing what you're doing. And then I realized that, well, actually, it's probably not a bad shout. So I did think about going back, but, I'd always wanted to better myself.
Do you think that a number of people get to that point? You come over because you're attracted by the grass is greener on the other side, and you get in and find, no, it's actually not green. It's very tough. Do you think a lot of people go through that?
Yeah, a lot of people do go through that. Sadly, some people leave too early. So imagine if I had gone back to Zimbabwe. You know, there are lots of, you know, people who are trained who are, you know, doing very well for themselves, but they're a minority. If you look at the rest of the population, you know, people have to be really well connected, and people have to, you know, compromise their own ethics and principles to, you know, to live a certain kind of life. And for me, that was something that I couldn't compromise on. So I wanted to stay here and make it here because there were other people here.
Was there a night where you went without food?
It didn't get that bad, but it was, what are you eating? And I think, you know, if you don't manage your money well, you know, you can really struggle.
And that I think that's the other advice to a lot of people out there. This is a place where a pound is a pound. You gotta be careful how you spend it.
And I think what happens, I think, you know, in economies like Zimbabwe, where sort of sometimes it's easy come, easy go, you know, people can get hold of a large amount of cash, you know, very easily. People sort of stop thinking about the true value of the money that they have. You know, I often go back home and realize just how expensive things are, because a lot of prices are really inflated, because it's not a very straightforward economy.
So you then, I get the sense, deliberately work at your education. The Royal College of Psychiatrists, the university, and then you land this job. What to you have been the big learnings from this role that you have? What are one big learnings and your key achievements in this position?
I think my biggest kind of lesson in my leadership career has been to be humble. I think, you know, as I was coming up, you know, I let it get to my head that I was becoming successful, and success came for me at a very young age. That can very easily turn into arrogance.
What was the cost of that? What happened?
Well,
what happened?
You make mistakes, and because you haven't built, you know, enough of a network and support system, base, people don't warn you. They just let you carry on. And then when everything goes wrong, you look around you and you think, but why didn't somebody tell me? Why didn't someone talk to me?
Any example of that mistake, the mistake that you made that cost you?
I think I remember I was a deputy medical director. And at that time, I wanted to make some large-scale changes, you know, to how job planning operated in the trust. And I did not sort of read the room, as it were, in terms of understanding, you know, what matters to consultants. Because these are very educated individuals who can make your life very difficult if you don't work with them. And I think I had, you know, everything planned out, and it was easy. It was going to work.
I was going to do it.
It was going to work. And I realized that, you know, being a strong man can only take you so far. If you want to go, you know, if you want to achieve things, you have to take everyone with you. You have to understand what people hold dear to themselves.
Did they strike?
They didn't strike. Oh, thankfully not.
What happened?
So I had written a policy. It was, I thought it was good prose. And they ripped it to shreds. In terms of, you know, really picked apart all the merits of it. And by the time I was finished, it looked a completely different document. And some of the things that I wanted to achieve, I had to take a step back, go back to the drawing board, and then sort of start working with,
That is another form of humble pie, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, that completely transformed my style of leadership.
What's your style of leadership now? How do you lead?
I'm more of a sort of consultative, servant leader. When I was coming up, I was often very frustrated about, how people led, and how they didn't allow people to bring ideas in, and they didn't listen. So what I realized very, very quickly is that I don't have a monopoly on good ideas. And my role as a leader is to create an environment where those good ideas can flourish. And when that happens, you still take credit for it.
Of course.
You still take credit for it. So I've gone about, celebrating, and really searching for talent. And I think that's where I've made, the greatest
And you've
moves.
learned this in situ, in the workplace.
I've learned this in the workplace.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I do now is a bit of a knockoff of Dragon's Den. I don't know if you've ever heard of Dragon's Den.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We at the moment in the NHS we're struggling for money, basically. Quite a lot of trusts are in deficit. And the temptation is always to go to all the different services and just sort of say, you need to cut costs, you need to cut costs, you need to cut costs. And when you do that, a lot of people, become very closed. You appear as though, you're being too authoritative, and that doesn't work. So you actually have to sort of share that problem with them and say to people, look, we've got an issue with money. What do you think we can do to come out of this mess?
Yeah.
So I encourage frontline clinicians to pitch ideas. So they come, it's like, clinical entrepreneurship in practice, really. So they come, they're bidding for something like, 10, 15,000 pounds. The money that I have in the innovation fund is not for salaries. It's for processes, it's for equipment. So if someone comes and says, I've got an idea about how we can do this at lower cost, at greater benefit, and we can, not only do quality improvement, but actually, publish literature on how we do this. And some of the ideas that have come out of that, with a £30,000 investment, we, are projecting saving about 1.5 million.
What's your budget? What budget are you working with?
Oh, that's a state secret. No, it's not. I think our budgets are, a matter of public knowledge. So our trust works with around 250 to 300 million
£1 a year.
Yeah. And
so we'll take a break there and go to and come back later. And my point of when we come back is that Labour has just come in, and I had the minister who's in charge of NHS saying NHS is a disaster. And I want to take from you in terms of what's the thought process of fixing this thing from your small corner and going forward. And I'd love us to. You are a golfer and you love cooking and so forth. So I want us to go to that place. So at home, don't go away. Join us after the break.
When you look at Zimbabwe, there's no shortage of expertise. I say this time and time again. It's the way the economy is managed, which is limiting our ability to have a decent healthcare.
Welcome back to our conversation with Dr. Itai Matumbike, the Medical Director at Northamptonshire NHS. So, Doctor, where were you born?
I was born in Masvingo at St. Anthony's Mission in Zaka. That's where I'm originally from. So my mom was actually a cook at the mission. And that's why when the family moved to Bulawayo, she always used to go back to the mission to deliver her babies. So, even though, we were living in number 6 in Bulawayo, my mom always used to go back to St. Anthony's Mission.
And which school did you go to then?
So the family moved around a lot. So I started off at St. Christopher's in Gwanda, and then we then moved to Gweru, and I did most of my primary school at Cecil John Roads. It was called Cecil John Roads at the time. I don't know
what it's called now.
I don't know what it's called now, with all the renaming of schools. So when I finished grade 7, my dad was transferred to Harare, and then I went to Prince Edward. I got to see different parts
of the country.
I was actually, believe it or not, and don't test me on this, quite fluent in Ndebele when I was much younger.
So you kuluma kati Ndebele?
Yeah, kuluma picha. Yes, but not too much.
Yeah.
My dad, on the other hand,
what did you get the most from your parents? I mean, when you look back, what values and principles did they impart to you?
To be independent. My father had a pretty rough childhood. So his own father died when he was 4. And there's a whole interesting story about that if you've got time. So he grew up, with his father having died in the rural areas, and his estate, dwindling, to the point that he couldn't afford any school fees. And he signed up to a seminary to finish his education. And when he did that, after that he left and started working in Bulawayo. But what his story taught me was that he could make something of himself from a very, very humble background. And what he's taught all of us is that we have to work for what we get. And I think that principle, that kind of way of thinking is what's given me a lot of determination to make it.
Stickability. I mean, the diaspora doesn't work, still stick it out. Let's go back to the NHS. I find a very interesting contradiction that it's a service that the British celebrate as providing healthcare, free healthcare, and so forth. And yet you hear from the people that use the service that it's terrible. The service is terrible. The queues are long, even for basic things. And the Labour is just coming now and say the system is broken. Why is it so celebrated when it's so broken, when the stories that you tend to hear are that this thing is not working? It's such an inconvenience. Help me understand what's happening here.
Okay. Well, this could be a career-limiting comment I'm about to make, but I think the NHS has grown too big. So it's one of the largest employers in Europe. And when you have got an organization which is charged with providing a service which is essentially free, but does not have unlimited resources, you inherently create a situation where a little doesn't go far enough.
And quality is going to be compromised.
Quality is going to be compromised. So if you look at, let's look at the kind of health insurance system, such as in the States. If you've got health insurance, you'll go to the best hospitals. You will be able to receive, all the best care because you're paying for it.
Immediate attention, no queues and stuff. Yeah.
But then if you don't have health insurance, you die. People, you walk to the, to the emergency department, don't have health insurance, they don't treat you. They just watch you die. Now, I'm actually really, really proud that I work for the NHS where health is free at the point of access. So we don't ask people, questions about whether they've got health insurance. If someone comes in an emergency, we look after them, we treat the emergency, and then we worry about
payment.
We don't get payment from our patients. It's all through
insurance,
national insurance contributions. Yeah. But the challenge that we have as NHS boards is how we make use of our allocation so that we still maintain a quality service. And it is still possible to do that. Remember, I was talking to you earlier about, how do you use your frontline clinicians to improve quality?
Yeah.
How do you sort of invest to save? How do you inject, a little bit of, distributed leadership to ensure that the work that you have at board level, is a lot easier. And you can worry about the big ticket items because a lot of the kind of local leadership, is at the same wavelength as you in terms of what you're trying to achieve.
So you say for the past 4 years you have been a voting member of the NHS Trust. These boards are independent, are they? Talk to me about how the boards function.
So the chief executive is, appointed by the regional director, and then the chief executive, along with the non-executive directors, the chair, then appoint the exec directors. So there are a number of statutory roles. The director of finance, the chief nurse or director of nursing, and the medical director, as well as the chief exec. Those are the 4 execs who've got voting rights on the board. The other non-execs have voting rights. The other execs don't usually have voting rights. Normally, boards operate, as unitary boards. So we rarely ever get to the point where we're sort of voting on an issue.
Okay.
A lot of it is consensus. Okay. But, it does come a point where we have to make some really difficult decisions.
Such as?
A decision about, for instance, whether or not to continue providing a service because, the cost envelope by the commissioners makes it unviable.
Do you get given a budget?
Yeah.
Okay. It comes from higher?
Yeah. And you've got a bit of autonomy as a board in terms of how you kind of distribute, the funding across the different services. And you also bid for services. So, for instance, you've got NHS England that commissions various specialist services. You've got your, local integrated care board, which commissions some of the local services. So they will decide, say for argument's sake, sexual health services. They will want you to provide, all the sexual health services, to that population, and you'll agree on a price based on your activity, based on, cost of your implements and, staffing, etc.
So tell me, with your experience, and with your experience across Zimbabwe, if somebody was to say, what are the one or two things that you look across Zimbabwe and say, we could do this to fix our health system quickly? What would that be?
Improve the welfare of the population. So it's the thing with health is it's really, even in this country, you'll notice that the better off people are, the better they are at taking care of their own health. And some of the really, really basic things which Zimbabwe did very well, like our literacy rate in the 80s, our immunization programs, they made massive changes to how people live. Things like water and sanitation, Blair toilets, that sort of stuff. You get rid of quite a lot of, the massive health problems which can cost, the Minister of Health quite a lot of money. And then the other thing that you then have to do is to allocate your resources, in your clinics and in your hospitals appropriately. You have to have a data-driven way of managing, your resources. You need to understand your population. And if you don't, things will hit you, and
absolutely,
you're sort of running.
You're walking blind.
You're walking blind. And when you look at Zimbabwe, there's no shortage of expertise. I say this time and time again. It's the way the economy is managed which is limiting, our ability to have a decent healthcare. If you have got, 4% of, the world's diamond reserves, or, you discover lithium, you've got no business having, hospitals that are under-resourced.
Absolutely.
You've got the money. It's where you're putting it.
Would you respond to a call that says, you love Zimbabwe, you've said, do something to help Zimbabwe's health system come right? Would you respond to that call?
I would. Depending on, whether the commitment of the people in charge was genuine. So if we go back to, how did I become frustrated? Albeit as a junior doctor, it's when you see things going wrong, and you know that the solutions are very easy, but you're still finding yourself powerless to do something about it. Now, that is even more frustrating if, in quotes, you're an influential individual. And if you're an influential individual, and you're not able to sort of, as I said, distribute the resources in the right way.
Effect change.
You're going to struggle. You're going to be very, very frustrated. So this is why I was saying to you that I would love to go. Many, senior leaders in the NHS who are from Zimbabwean backgrounds have done various things. People, have worked with charities to, improve, particular hospitals and sort of concentrate on one small area where you can have, some influence which is not necessarily derailed, by the powers that be.
Tell me, what do you miss about Zimbabwe the most?
The weather.
I laugh because you're the second person to say that. The weather. And what else?
Just being, around family. Zimbabwe is a beautiful country.
Mm.
There are lots of lovely tourist destinations. I mean,
What do you hate about this place? Don't you like? Maybe hate is a strong word. What don't you like about this place?
I think, it goes
Shall
back.
we? Let's start with what do you like the most about being here? You're a British citizen, hey?
Yeah.
What do you like the most about?
What I like the most about being here is the basics are available. So, I don't need to worry about, things like
Water,
fuel,
electricity, roads,
that sort of stuff. So the basics are available. And actually the indignation when, those simple things
go away.
Is astounding. People in Zimbabwe have gotten used to, there's going to be a power cut, and they just they're okay.
What do you dislike the most about being here?
I think if you are from the global majority, as in you're locally an ethnic minority, you will experience racism, and that happens.
Do you experience it?
Yeah. I have done, throughout, my working life here. Sometimes it's really, really subtle. You can't pick it out, but you can tell.
Sometimes it's in your face. What's been the worst? What's been the worst that you've experienced?
I think I was a junior doctor when a patient relative realized that their doctor was black, and they came to make a complaint. There was nothing wrong with
my heart.
There was nothing wrong with what I prescribed or how I treated them, but they made a complaint that how very dare the hospital allow their son to be treated by a black doctor. This is sheer ignorance.
But it's real. It doesn't
real.
excuse
It's ignorance, and it's thankfully not something that you see every day. But when it does happen, it's quite impactful.
What did that make you feel? What did that do to you?
It made me feel very unwelcome. But I'll tell you what the worst bit of that situation was. This was said in front of a number of colleagues, some of whom were white. And, they just stood there and watched whilst this individual berated me, not for my clinical skills or whatever, but for the color of my skin. And that sort of, your colleagues not having your back, made me feel really isolated. And I think as I have, progressed in my career, I've become a really strong advocate, of anti-racism. And, we call it out whenever it happens. It doesn't happen every day, but when it does happen, we call it out.
Call it out.
Yeah.
Doctor, you love cooking. You are a golfer, and you love football. Why do you love cooking? What do you get from cooking?
So remember I told you my mom?
Yes.
So she was a cook at St. Anthony's. So throughout our upbringing, we were taught how to cook. So it didn't matter whether you were a boy or a girl at home.
That's a beautiful story.
And then I just really got into it because I'm a very greedy individual.
You love your food.
So
what's your favorite dish?
Steak.
Steak. Okay. Yeah.
I loved an aged steak. With peppercorn sauce. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. And you love making steak.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So I then, started, always hanging around the barbecue. whenever we had a braai or anything like that, I'd always be, getting involved. After I got divorced, I had to do a lot of cooking for myself and for the kids. And the more I did that, the more I sort of, I couldn't serve them spaghetti bolognese every day. I had to sort of, switch it up a bit.
Tell me, you've mentioned divorce. How do you look at that? Was it a failure for you? If it wasn't, what lessons did you get from your divorce?
I consider it to be a failure of sorts. I think.
Is it the biggest failure that you've gone through, experienced in life?
It's up there. I think what happens is, life happens. Yeah. People grow apart, and sometimes, I think when you're going through a divorce, you get stuck in a frame of mind that you're the one who's being wronged, and you don't
ascribe any contribution to yourself. Yeah.
And that intransigence, can allow relationships to, suffer irreparable damage. And that for me has been the lesson, which is that, sometimes you have to be a little bit more introspective and think about how your actions are impacting on the other individual, even if you are sure in your mind with every bone in your body
that I was right.
That you're right.
Yeah.
You have to think about
what was my contribution?
What was my contribution to this whole situation? And, I was young. I've grown.
How old were you when you divorced?
39. Yeah. So I think some of those.
Is it a scar? Does it hang around? Does it linger?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. It does. But I think I'm pleased to be in a loving relationship now, and life goes on. I think I take some of the lessons into my sort of current relationship, and use those as a means, as a springboard to do better as an individual.
Absolutely.
And I think some of those really tough life lessons have helped me in my own leadership. Because a lot of what we do as execs is conflict resolution, and when you are able to sort of allow people to kind of see the other side. Yeah. You're halfway through kind of resolving the issue.
Doctor, thank you so much. We're going to turn to books now. Our viewers who are all over the world absolutely love books. So we're going to go to the Trevor Book Club recommendations. What 3 books have you read that you would recommend to our book lovers?
The Nelson Mandela book, Long Walk to Freedom. I think I had a very warped understanding, of the liberation struggle in South Africa. But I think sort of looking at what his journey was like, those years of incarceration, being isolated, the impact on his family, impact on his, personal life, and also some of the trade-offs, I mean,
deciding to negotiate.
Mandela was a great man, but I do, have some misgivings about certain aspects. And
any next book?
The next book, because I love history. was a book called Becoming Zimbabwe. I think Raftopoulos and Co.
Okay.
I've got an interest in history. Which is strange
for a doctor.
Can I say that?
No, that's.
I think what I liked about that book was that it had a long spectrum. It spoke about kind of the prehistoric ages, and then it spoke quite a lot about the politics, and then it spoke a lot about kind of the lives of we've always kind of looked at Zimbabwe as black and white. We never really understood the plight of people who were mixed race, and how they
That's
perceive.
interesting.
So that for me was was fascinating.
Yeah. Your third book?
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go revert to type. So my third book is Doctors. So it's a book about American medical students and their journeys to becoming doctors.
It's written by who? Do you remember?
Oh, I don't remember.
It's called Doctors.
Yeah, the book is called Doctors.
Okay.
But the main character in the book is a psychiatrist.
Is this fiction? Is it a fiction?
It is. It's
fiction.
It's a work of fiction, but it was very well researched. So the person who wrote the book is not a doctor, actually. They were a journalist who spent a lot of time in a hospital, and spent some time around doctors, and they kind of used that, to write the book. So it talks about people's journeys through med school, which can be a harrowing experience, and what happens when people qualify. They've got these high pressure jobs. They don't have time for relationships, and they have got children who suffer loss, who suffer serious health conditions. How do they cope with that?
Fascinating. Dr. Matumbike, I know I've been slaughtering your name throughout. Thank you so much for coming, Itai. You've given us a rich perspective of what it is like to the pressures that made you leave Zim. And the challenges of coming here and trying to settle down and make a life for yourselves, the mistakes that you've made and the lessons that you've gotten from those mistakes. Allow me to say that for us Zimbabweans, looking at you guys in the NHS doing what you're doing, we're very proud of you. We're very proud of you. You are also testimony of the amazing education that we had, particularly the doctors that we produced, the veterinary scientists that we produced from the University of Zimbabwe. So we look up to you and we're grateful for the work that you do. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much, Trevor.
Allow me to turn over to our viewers who are all over the world to say thank you so much for watching us every Monday, 7 a.m. Central African time on YouTube. We are a weekly show. We love your views. We love your comments below this video in terms of the conversation that we've been having right now. Let's have your feedback. Let's have your thoughts. Remember, you can go to our website where all our content sits for your viewing and for your listening pleasure. As you water the garden, as you wash your cars, you can be binging on our content. To ensure that you don't miss out on any of these conversations, please remember to subscribe, to like, and to share. From London in the UK, cheers to you all.